Welcome to our channel. Today, we delve into a compelling story of love, betrayal, and resilience titled, Unveiled Betrayal. James's journey through a cheating wife's deception and finding solace. James Parker, a successful software engineer living in San Francisco, seemed to have it all: an impressive career, a beautiful home, and a loving marriage. However, his life takes an unexpected turn when he discovers his wife, Emma, has been emotionally involved with another man. This revelation sets James on a path of heartache, self-discovery, and ultimately, healing. Join us as we explore James's emotional roller coaster, his struggle to come to terms with Emma's betrayal, and his journey towards rebuilding his life. This story is a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit and the possibility of new beginnings. Stay tuned for a tale that will keep you hooked from start to finish. James Parker sat alone in the quiet expanse of his living room, surrounded by the faint hum of the city outside his San Francisco apartment. The early April sun streamed through the large windows, casting a warm glow across the modern furnishings. It was a peaceful Saturday afternoon, and James was engaged in the mundane task of cleaning, something that offered him a semblance of control amidst the chaos of his thoughts. James, a 35-year-old software engineer, had lived in San Francisco for over a decade. His apartment, located in the heart of the city, was a testament to his successful career. Tastefully decorated with minimalist furniture, it exuded a sense of calm and order. Yet, despite the outward appearance of stability, James's life had been anything but serene in recent months. Emma, his wife of 10 years, had moved to Los Angeles 6 months ago for a new job opportunity at a prominent tech company. The move had been a difficult but necessary decision, as her career in digital marketing was thriving. James had supported her wholeheartedly, although with mixed feelings. The distance had taken its toll on their relationship, and the frequent flights and long phone calls could not bridge the growing emotional gap. James's thoughts often drifted to their last conversation, marked by tension and unspoken frustrations. He missed Emma's presence, her laughter, and the simple comfort of their shared life. Yet, he also felt a strange sense of foreboding, an inexplicable anxiety that gnawed at him during quiet moments like this. As he moved a stack of magazines from the coffee table, his hand brushed against Emma's old phone, which she had left behind during her last visit. It was a sleek, outdated model, still functional despite its age. Emma had asked him to retrieve some old photos stored on it, a task he had been putting off. Curiosity nudged him as he picked up the phone, the cool metal casing feeling oddly heavy in his hand. With a sense of harmless intent, James powered on the device, the screen lighting up with a burst of notifications. The familiar startup chime echoed through the room, pulling him further into a wave of nostalgia. Minutes ticked by as James browsed through the gallery, a smile playing on his lips as he revisited the memories of their vacations. Photos of sunlit beaches, bustling city streets, and quiet countryside landscapes filled the screen. Emma's radiant smile in every photo reminded him of better times, times when their love had felt unbreakable. It was a message notification that snapped him out of his reverie, a message that was clearly not meant for his eyes. The sender was labeled simply as Michael, and the preview showed more than just friendly banter. Feeling a knot form in his stomach, James hesitated but ultimately opened the messaging app. The texts he read were a jarring contrast to the mundane day he had planned. There were mentions of meet-ups that Emma had never spoken of, and a photo sent late at night, a selfie of Emma that seemed too intimate for just a friend. "Hey beautiful, can't wait to see you again next week. Miss you," one of the messages from Michael read. A cold wave of betrayal washed over James as he continued to scroll through months of conversation. There were plans made, intimate moments shared, and a clear emotional connection that went far beyond a platonic friendship. James's heart pounded in his ears. This was not the Emma he thought he knew. With hands trembling slightly, he placed the phone down and sat back, trying to process the information. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the reality of his wife's betrayal sank in. The familiar surroundings now felt alien, tainted by the knowledge that the life he thought he had was built on lies. James sat on the edge of the couch, the old phone still clutched in his hand. The messages from Michael replayed in his mind, each word a dagger to his heart. He felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and confusion. How could Emma do this to him? To their marriage? To their family? His thoughts raced as he tried to make sense of everything. Emma had always been the more social one, always making new friends easily, but this was different. This was a betrayal. James could feel the knot in his stomach tightening as he stood up and began pacing the living room. He needed answers, and he needed them now. With a deep breath, he picked up his own phone and dialed Emma's number. Each ring felt like an eternity, the anticipation building with every second. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Emma answered. Hello? Emma's voice was a soft, familiar melody, but today it sounded distant and almost foreign to James. Emma, it's James, he began, trying to keep his voice steady. We need to talk. James? What's wrong? Her voice was filled with concern, but James could hear the underlying tension. She knew something was up. It's about Michael, James said, cutting straight to the point. He could hear Emma's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. What about Michael? Emma's tone was cautious, defensive. Emma, I saw the messages, James said, his voice shaking slightly. I saw the messages on your old phone. The ones from Michael. What's going on? There was a long pause, the silence heavy with unspoken words. James could almost hear Emma's mind racing, trying to come up with an explanation. James, it's not what you think, Emma finally said, her voice trembling. Michael is just a friend. We talk about work, about life. There's nothing more to it. Nothing more to it? James repeated, his voice rising in disbelief. Emma, I saw the messages. The late-night texts, the photos. How can you say there's nothing more to it? James, please, you're overreacting, Emma pleaded. Yes, we message each other, but it's innocent. I was lonely, and Michael was there to talk to. But there's nothing romantic between us. James felt a surge of anger. Innocent? Emma, the messages I read were far from innocent. Hey beautiful, can't wait to see you again next week. Miss you. How do you explain that? Emma was silent for a moment. James, I don't know what to say. I'm sorry if it hurt you, but I promise you, Michael is just a friend. James shook his head, his frustration mounting. Emma, do you think I'm a fool? Do you think I can't see what's right in front of me? You've been lying to me, hiding this from me. How am I supposed to trust you after this? James, please, Emma's voice cracked, and James could hear the tears in her voice. I never meant to hurt you. I was just so lonely here. I missed you so much, and Michael was there. But it doesn't mean I don't love you. James felt his heart breaking, but he couldn't ignore the betrayal. Emma, love isn't just about words. It's about trust, about honesty. And right now, I don't know if I can trust you anymore. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. James could feel the weight of his words hanging in the air, the finality of them sinking in. James, I understand, Emma finally whispered. I'm so sorry. I wish I could take it all back. James closed his eyes, feeling the sting of tears. So do I, Emma. So do I. The call ended with unresolved tensions, leaving James staring at the bright afternoon sun streaming through the windows, feeling the weight of a truth he had never wanted to uncover. The path ahead was uncertain, and the foundation of his marriage now seemed as fragile as the rays of sunlight that fractured against the glass. James sat back down on the couch, his mind reeling from the conversation. He felt a mixture of anger, sadness, and a profound sense of loss. The life he had known, the marriage he had cherished, was now tainted by betrayal. He knew that the journey ahead would not be easy, but he also knew that he needed to face it head-on, no matter how painful it might be. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. James tried to distract himself with cleaning, but his mind kept drifting back to the phone call, to Emma's voice, to the messages from Michael. He felt like a stranger in his own life, adrift in a sea of confusion and hurt. As evening fell, James knew he needed to take the next step. He couldn't stay in this limbo forever. He needed to find out the full truth, to confront Emma face to face. It was the only way to begin to heal, to start piecing his life back together. With a heavy heart, James booked a flight to Los Angeles. The decision felt both liberating and terrifying, but he knew it was the right one. He needed to see Emma, to look her in the eyes and hear the truth from her lips. Only then could he begin to understand what had happened and decide what to do next. As he packed his bag, James took one last look around his apartment. The place that had once been a sanctuary now felt like a prison, filled with memories that were both beautiful and painful. He took a deep breath and walked out the door, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The journey to Los Angeles would be the longest and hardest of his life, but it was a journey he needed to take. For himself, for his marriage, and for the future he hoped to rebuild. The decision to fly to Los Angeles had been made in a moment of clarity amidst the chaos of emotions. As James sat in the back of a ride-share car on the way to San Francisco International Airport, he couldn't help but replay the events of the past day in his mind. The discovery of Emma's messages with Michael had shattered his world, and now he was determined to confront her face to face. The ride to the airport was filled with a tense silence. The city passed by in a blur of lights and motion, the familiar sights of San Francisco now feeling distant and unimportant. James glanced out the window, his mind racing with thoughts of what he would say to Emma, how he would approach the conversation. He knew it wouldn't be easy, but he needed answers. At the airport, James moved through security and boarded his flight with mechanical efficiency. The usual hustle and bustle of the terminal felt surreal, as if he were moving through a dream. As he settled into his seat on the plane, he stared out the window, watching the ground fall away as they ascended into the sky. The flight felt interminable, each minute stretching into an eternity as he mentally prepared for the confrontation ahead. The flight finally landed at Los Angeles International Airport, and James disembarked, his resolve firm. The City of Angels greeted him with its characteristic warmth and brightness, a stark contrast to the turmoil in his heart. He hailed a cab and directed the driver to Emma's apartment in downtown Los Angeles. As the cab navigated the busy streets, James felt a mix of anxiety and determination. He hadn't seen Emma in person for months, and now he was about to confront her with the evidence of her betrayal. The familiar landmarks of Los Angeles, the towering buildings, and the bustling crowds, all seemed to blur together as he focused on what lay ahead. The cab pulled up to Emma's apartment building, a modern high-rise with sleek architecture. James paid the driver and stood for a moment, gathering his thoughts. He took a deep breath and entered the building, riding the elevator to her floor. Each ding of the elevator brought him closer to the inevitable confrontation. When he reached Emma's door, he hesitated for a brief moment before knocking. The sound echoed down the hallway, and James's heart pounded in his chest. The door opened, and there stood Emma, her eyes widening in surprise and then quickly filling with apprehension. "James? What are you doing here?" Emma's voice was a mixture of shock and concern. "We need to talk, Emma." "I couldn't do this over the phone," James replied, stepping past her into the apartment. The apartment was tastefully decorated, a reflection of Emma's keen eye for design. But to James, it felt foreign, a place that held no warmth or comfort. He turned to face Emma, who had closed the door and was now looking at him with a mixture of fear and sadness. "James, I didn't expect you to come all the way here," she began, her voice trembling. "Emma, I need to know the truth," James said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "I saw the messages between you and Michael. I need to understand what's been going on." Emma looked down, her eyes avoiding his. She took a deep breath and walked over to the couch, motioning for James to sit. He remained standing, his eyes fixed on her as she gathered her thoughts. "James, I never meant for things to get this far," Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper. "When I moved here, I was so lonely. I missed you, I missed our life together. And then I met Michael." James felt a surge of anger and pain, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. "Michael was there for me," Emma said, her eyes filling with tears. "We started as friends, just talking about work and life. But then, it became more. I was so alone, and he was there." "So you turned to him?" James asked, his voice tinged with bitterness. "You chose him over our marriage?" "It wasn't like that, James," Emma said, shaking her head. "I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to hurt you. But I felt so isolated here, and Michael was. He was a comfort. James took a deep breath, trying to process her words. The betrayal cut deep, but he needed to understand the full extent of what had happened. Did you sleep with him? James asked bluntly, his eyes searching hers for the truth. Emma's face paled, and she looked away, unable to meet his gaze. No, James, I swear. We never crossed that line. But there were moments. Moments where I felt closer to him than I should have. James felt a mix of relief and continued anger. So you were emotionally cheating on me, he said, his voice shaking. You let him into your heart when that space should have been mine. Emma's tears flowed freely now. I'm so sorry, James. I know I messed up. I know I hurt you. But it was never meant to be anything more than a way to cope with the loneliness. James ran a hand through his hair, his mind a whirlwind of emotions. Emma, I don't know if I can forgive this. Trust is everything in a marriage, and you've shattered mine. Emma looked up at him, her eyes pleading. I understand if you can't forgive me. But please, James, believe me when I say that I love you. That I've always loved you. I want to fix this, to make things right. James sighed, the weight of the situation pressing down on him. I need time to think, Emma. This isn't something I can just move past in a day. We need to figure out what happens next. Emma nodded, her face a picture of remorse. Take all the time you need, James. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. James stood up, the room feeling stifling. I need some air, he said, walking towards the door. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk again. Emma watched him go, her heart breaking as he walked out the door. She knew she had a long road ahead to earn back his trust, but she was determined to fight for their marriage. James stepped out into the bustling streets of Los Angeles, the city's energy a stark contrast to the turmoil inside him. He walked aimlessly, his thoughts a tangled mess. The betrayal had cut deep, but he knew that the journey to healing would be a long and difficult one. As he wandered the streets, he resolved to take it one step at a time, hoping that someday, he could find a way to forgive and move forward. James spent the night in a nearby hotel, tossing and turning, unable to find solace in sleep. The weight of the decision he knew he had to make pressed heavily on his mind. The betrayal was too deep, the trust too shattered. He had hoped to find some clarity during his walk, but all he found was more pain and confusion. As the sun rose, casting a pale light over the city of Los Angeles, James knew what he had to do. It was a decision that broke his heart, but it was the only way he could see to move forward. He needed to end this chapter of his life and find a way to heal. He checked out of the hotel and made his way back to Emma's apartment, his steps heavy with the weight of what was to come. When he knocked on the door, Emma answered almost immediately, her eyes red-rimmed from a night likely as sleepless as his. James, she said, her voice raw with emotion. I was so worried. Did you sleep at all? James nodded slightly, stepping inside. We need to talk, Emma. I've made a decision. Emma's face fell, and she motioned for him to sit. They both took seats on opposite ends of the couch, a symbolic representation of the emotional distance between them. James, please, she began, her voice trembling. Before you say anything, I just want you to know how sorry I am. I never meant to hurt you. James held up a hand, stopping her. I know, Emma, and I believe you, but sorry isn't enough. This isn't something I can just forgive and forget. You broke my trust, and without trust, there's no foundation for our marriage. Tears welled up in Emma's eyes, and she nodded, understanding the finality of his words. So, what happens now? James took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he had to say. We need to separate, at least for now. Maybe someday, with time and effort, we can rebuild, but right now, I need space to heal. Emma covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. I understand, James. I don't want to lose you, but I know I've done this to us. James reached out, taking her hand gently. We'll need to figure out how to handle things with Sophie. She's our priority, and we need to make this as easy as possible for her. Emma looked up, wiping away her tears. You're right. We need to be strong for her. How do you want to handle it? James thought for a moment. I think it's best if Sophie stays with you during the weekdays. You have more stability here with your job. I'll come down to visit on weekends and holidays. We'll need to explain to her what's happening in a way she can understand, without making her feel like she has to choose sides. Emma nodded in agreement. That sounds fair. I'll do everything I can to make this as smooth as possible for her. The practicalities of their separation discussed, James stood up, feeling a strange mix of relief and sorrow. He walked to the door, turning back to look at Emma one last time. She stood there, looking fragile and heartbroken, the weight of their shared history hanging in the air. James, she said softly, her voice breaking. I hope one day you can forgive me. I hope we can find our way back to each other. James gave a small, sad smile. I hope so too, Emma. Take care of yourself and Sophie. With that, he turned and walked out the door, the finality of his decision hitting him with every step he took away from the apartment. The bright Los Angeles sun was a stark contrast to the darkness he felt inside, but there was also a glimmer of hope. He had taken the first step toward healing, toward rebuilding his life. As he walked down the busy streets, the sounds of the city around him, James felt a sense of release. The pain of the betrayal was still there, raw and aching, but there was also a sense of possibility. He was free to find a new path, to discover who he was outside of his marriage. The road ahead would be difficult, filled with challenges and moments of doubt, but James knew he had made the right decision. For himself, for Emma, and for Sophie. He would take it one day at a time, learning to forgive and to heal, finding his way back to a life of happiness and fulfillment. James stepped off the plane at San Francisco International Airport, feeling a mix of exhaustion and resolve. The familiar sights and sounds of the city greeted him as he made his way through the terminal and hailed a cab. He gave his address to the driver and leaned back, watching the city he called home come into view. His apartment felt different now, emptier, yet filled with a sense of possibility. He had taken the first steps toward healing by separating from Emma, and now he needed to find a way to rebuild his life. James decided to throw himself into his work, finding solace in the familiar routines and challenges of his job. As a software engineer at a thriving tech company, James had always enjoyed the intellectual stimulation his work provided. He found comfort in the logical structure of coding, a stark contrast to the emotional turmoil of his personal life. He worked long hours, often staying late at the office to finish projects and meet deadlines. His colleagues noticed his increased focus, but no one commented on it, understanding that he needed the distraction. Despite the comfort work provided, James knew he needed more than just his job to fill the void left by his broken marriage. He remembered his long-standing interest in photography, a hobby he had always wanted to explore but never found the time for. With newfound determination, James signed up for a photography class at a local community center. The first class was a revelation. James felt a spark of excitement as he handled the camera, learning about lighting, composition, and the technical aspects of capturing a perfect shot. The instructor, a seasoned photographer named Lisa, was passionate and knowledgeable, making each lesson engaging and inspiring. James found himself looking forward to the classes, eagerly practicing the techniques he learned. He spent weekends exploring the city, capturing the beauty of San Francisco through his lens. The world seemed different when viewed through the camera, each moment, each scene, imbued with a sense of wonder and possibility. The act of creating something beautiful, of seeing the world in new ways, brought James a sense of joy he hadn't felt in a long time. Photography became a form of therapy, a way to process his emotions and find peace in the present moment. The camera allowed him to focus on the light, even when shadows loomed large in his personal life. One of the most important aspects of James's journey to rebuild his life was his relationship with his daughter, Sophie. The separation from Emma had been difficult, but James was determined to be there for Sophie, to provide her with stability and love. Every weekend, Sophie would come to stay with him, and those days became the highlight of his week. They explored the city together, visiting parks, museums, and all the little wonders that San Francisco had to offer. James made an effort to create special memories, knowing how important it was for Sophie to feel connected and loved. Sophie, in turn, became his greatest source of strength and joy. Her laughter, curiosity, and boundless energy were infectious, helping James to see the world through her eyes. He found himself cherishing the simple moments, watching her play, helping her with homework, and listening to her stories about school and friends. One sunny Saturday, they decided to visit the Golden Gate Park. Sophie was excited about the playground and the carousel, but James had something else in mind. He brought his camera, hoping to capture some candid shots of their day together. As they walked through the park, James took photos of Sophie as she ran ahead, her hair flowing in the breeze, her face lit up with joy. He captured her climbing the playground structures, her triumphant grin as she reached the top. The carousel was a blur of colors and motion, and James managed to capture Sophie's delighted expression as she rode one of the horses. "Look, Daddy, I'm flying," Sophie exclaimed, her arms outstretched as the carousel spun. James laughed, snapping a picture. "You sure are, sweetheart." Later, they sat on a bench, sharing ice cream cones and watching the people pass by. Sophie leaned against James, her small hand in his, and he felt a profound sense of contentment. "Daddy, can we do this every weekend?" Sophie asked, looking up at him with hopeful eyes. "Of course, Sophie," James replied, squeezing her hand gently. Every weekend. As the weeks turned into months, James found that the pain of the past began to fade, replaced by new experiences and the slow mending of his heart. The bond with Sophie grew stronger, and he became more involved in her life, attending school events, and helping her with projects. They developed new traditions, like Sunday morning pancakes and evening storytime, rituals that brought them closer together. Photography continued to be a source of joy and fulfillment for James. He started sharing his photos online, joining a community of fellow photography enthusiasts who appreciated his work and offered encouragement. The positive feedback bolstered his confidence, and he began to think about the possibilities of turning his hobby into something more. One evening, as James was editing some photos, he received a message from Lisa, his photography instructor. She had seen his recent work and was impressed, suggesting that he submit some of his photos to a local gallery for an upcoming exhibition. James was thrilled by the suggestion but also nervous. The idea of sharing his work with a broader audience was both exciting and intimidating. He decided to take the plunge, selecting his best photos and preparing them for submission. The day of the exhibition arrived, and James stood in the gallery, surrounded by his photos displayed on the walls. Friends, colleagues, and even strangers admired his work, and James felt a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. Sophie was there too, her eyes wide with wonder as she looked at the pictures her daddy had taken. "Daddy, you're famous," she exclaimed, hugging his leg. James chuckled, lifting her up. "Not quite, but thank you, Sophie." As the evening went on, James received many compliments and even sold a few of his photos. The experience was validating, reinforcing the sense of purpose and joy that photography had brought into his life. Through his work, his hobby, and his relationship with Sophie, James gradually found hope again. The pain of the past didn't disappear entirely, but it no longer defined him. He learned to forgive, not just Emma, but also himself, allowing him to move forward without the burden of bitterness. James's journey to rebuild his life was far from over, but he was on the right path. With each step, he discovered new strengths and possibilities, finding beauty in the unexpected and learning to focus on the light, even when shadows loomed large. Months had passed since James first discovered the messages on Emma's old phone. As he sat in his San Francisco apartment, reflecting on the journey he had undertaken, he felt a profound sense of growth. The pain of betrayal had initially consumed him, but through work, hobbies, and his daughter, he had found a way to rebuild and rediscover himself. James had thrown himself into his software engineering job with a renewed vigor. He had taken on new projects, pushed the boundaries of his skills, and earned the respect of his colleagues and superiors. Work had been a refuge, a place where he could find structure and achievement amidst the chaos of his personal life. But beyond his professional accomplishments, it was the personal growth that truly defined his journey. Photography had become more than just a hobby, it was a passion that allowed him to see the world through a new lens, to capture moments of beauty and significance. The gallery exhibition had been a milestone, but it was the everyday joy of taking photos that truly fulfilled him. James's relationship with Sophie had blossomed into something even more special. They had developed a rhythm, a series of routines and traditions that brought them closer together. Sophie's presence in his life was a constant source of joy and inspiration. One Friday evening, as James was preparing dinner, Sophie sat at the kitchen table, working on a drawing. She looked up, her face thoughtful. "Daddy, why did you and Mommy stop living together?" she asked innocently. James paused, setting down the knife he was using to chop vegetables. This was a conversation he had known would come, and he had prepared himself for it. "Sophie, sometimes grown-ups have problems that they can't fix together," James began gently. "It doesn't mean they don't love each other or love their children. Your mommy and I decided it was best for us to live apart so we could be happier and take better care of you." Sophie nodded slowly, taking in his words. "But you and Mommy still love me, right?" "Absolutely," James said, walking over to hug her. "Your Mommy and I love you very much, and that will never change." Sophie smiled, her worries eased. "I love you too, Daddy." Building new connections. James continued to expand his social circle, making new friends through his photography classes and work. One evening, after a particularly successful photo shoot, Lisa, his photography instructor, invited him and a few other students out for drinks to celebrate. As they sat in a cozy bar, sharing stories and laughter, James realized how much he had missed social connections. Lisa was engaging and supportive, and their conversations flowed effortlessly. He found himself opening up about his journey, his struggles, and the joy he had found in photography. "James, your work has really come a long way," Lisa said, raising her glass in a toast. "You have a unique perspective, and it shows in your photos." "Thank you, Lisa," James replied, clinking his glass with hers. "Your guidance has been invaluable." The evening was filled with camaraderie and warmth, a stark contrast to the loneliness he had felt months ago. James left the bar feeling a renewed sense of belonging and connection. One sunny afternoon, as James was editing photos in his apartment, he received an unexpected call from Emma. He hesitated for a moment before answering, unsure of what to expect. "Hi, James," Emma's voice was soft, almost hesitant. "I've been thinking a lot about us and everything that happened. I know I hurt you deeply, and I'm truly sorry for that." James took a deep breath, his heart heavy with memories. "I appreciate that, Emma. I've been doing a lot of thinking too." "I'm glad to hear that," Emma continued. "I wanted to know if you'd be open to meeting sometime, to talk and see where we stand. For Sophie's sake, if nothing else." James considered her words. The idea of facing Emma again was daunting, but he knew that true healing required facing the past head-on. "I think that would be a good idea. We owe it to Sophie to be the best parents we can be." They arranged to meet at a cafe halfway between San Francisco and Los Angeles. When the day arrived, James felt a mix of nervousness and resolve. He knew this meeting could be a turning point. As he entered the cafe, he saw Emma sitting at a table by the window, looking out pensively. She looked up as he approached, a tentative smile on her face. "Hi, James," she greeted him. "Hi, Emma," he replied, taking a seat across from her. They spent the next hour talking openly and honestly. Emma expressed her remorse, explaining how loneliness and poor decisions had led to her emotional affair with Michael. James listened, his own heart filled with a mix of empathy and sadness. "I know I broke your trust, James, and I don't expect you to forgive me easily," Emma said, her eyes brimming with tears. "But I want to do whatever it takes to make things right for Sophie." James nodded, feeling a sense of closure. "I appreciate that, Emma. I've learned a lot through all of this, and I think it's important we both move forward, for Sophie's sake." They agreed to work together to provide a stable, loving environment for their daughter. It was a small step towards healing, but it was a significant one. Embracing the future. Back in San Francisco, James continued to focus on his photography and his relationship with Sophie. The future was still uncertain, but he felt a sense of hope and possibility that had been missing for a long time. One weekend, as they were exploring a new park, Sophie turned to him with a bright smile. "Daddy, Can we take more pictures today? I want to learn how to use your camera. James's heart swelled with pride and joy. Of course, Sophie. Let's capture some memories together. As they wandered through the park, snapping photos and laughing together, James realized that he had come full circle. The pain of the past had given way to new beginnings, new joys, and new connections. Life, like photography, was about finding beauty in unexpected places and focusing on the light even when shadows loomed large. James had learned to embrace the present, to forgive, and to look forward to the future with hope and determination. The journey to rebuild his life had been long and difficult, but it had also been profoundly rewarding. With Sophie by his side and a camera in his hand, James knew that he was ready to face whatever came next. Thank you for joining us on this emotional journey through Unveiled Betrayal. James's journey through a cheating wife's deception and finding solace. James Parker's story is one of immense heartache and profound resilience. From the moment he discovered Emma's betrayal to his journey of self-discovery through photography and his deepening bond with his daughter, Sophie, James has shown that even in the darkest times, there is a path to healing and hope. As James steps into a future filled with new possibilities, he reminds us all that life's unexpected turns can lead to new beginnings. His ability to forgive, embrace his passions, and prioritize his daughter's well-being illustrates the incredible strength of the human spirit. We hope James's story has inspired you as much as it has inspired us. If you enjoyed this journey, please like, subscribe, and share this video with others who might find solace in this tale of redemption and renewal. Stay tuned for more stories that touch the heart and uplift the soul. Thank you for watching.